ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Cameroon Town Hall for Healthcare Professionals. And we are very grateful to have had a wonderful year so far. We've had this is the 90th edition of the Cameroon Town Hall. What an achievement to have hosted 90 episodes of this great movement, I'll call it this way. I'm going to hand over the mic to Brian, who is going to do the moderating today. So Brian, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. I think when I look back in retrospect, I think it's been an exciting year. I was thinking about reflecting on the different subjects that was covered, the different guest speakers that I think we had. It's just been a lot to unpack. We had the privilege of having the minister come here and also express some of his priorities for the Cameroon government and where he's thinking of his vision for universal health coverage, which has been a very big conversation. So I think it's been a very profound year. And I also have been looking forward to this great conversation with with Elvis on the clinical trial, which I think is a great and amazing way to close the year. I unfortunately missed the session last session with Dr. Bogumati Tanji when she talked about really the future of HIV and HIV therapeutics. I have no doubt that was a very powerful message. So I think in retrospect, I think the year, with the Cameroon Town Hall has been remarkable. I think there's a lot of things that we've learned, and I hope that all of these things, the expertise that has been shared here is translated into actionable steps that we can move into the new year moving forward. So really exciting to have everyone, and thanks everyone for joining. Hi, Elvis.
Hi. So I can imagine it's the 90th session, right? When you said that, it blew my mind, like 90 already. That's really huge, and it's thanks to everyone who takes time every fortnight to tune in on our Cameroon Town Hall for Healthcare Professionals, Brian. So it's really exciting to be here today, not as a co-moderator, but as a presenter. But I hope that we're going to share together with what we have to talk about clinical trials in Africa.
Yeah, sure. I just wanted to pinpoint a few people from the audience, if they'd be willing to, I don't know, just give a few reflections on their participation, first of all, in the town hall, and what they think about what the last year has meant for them in their participation. So I don't know, I would just call randomly. I don't know, Donald, I don't know if you're connected, you'll be willing to say a few words. Chat me, Donald.
Hi, Brian. Sorry, a little bit busy. I'm just listening.
Yeah, thanks a lot. We're reflecting about the last 1 year and some of the things that we've learned and some of the expertise that has been gathered here in the last 1 year, and thinking about prospectively how we can translate some of those debates and conversations that we've had moving into the new year. I don't know if Dr. Nginwi is also here. I know she was one of the speakers that we had. Nginwi Kuala, any thoughts? Nginwi, I hope I'm pronouncing the name right. Yes.
Is Nginwi Kuala.
Sorry for that.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I agree with you that it has been a wealth of expertise that has been showcased over the last 1 year. And I salute the resilience of the team to be able to organize this and scout the level of expertise on a weekly basis. That's something to be able to salute. So I'm looking forward to the session of today, and I'm excited about new learnings. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Really thanks again. In retrospect, thanks again for your presentation early in the year. I think that's a very, very resounding message, and I hope that the town hall and the collaborations that you've had here has helped to scale the work you're doing with your organization as well. So thanks a lot for everything that you do. I do see Dr. Kenji is on. I don't know if Kenji, I know you're very, very busy, but I don't know if any comments, any words.
From
Yeah,
Abu Dhabi.
thank you so much, Brian. Hi, everybody. I mean, this is now a movement and it's unstoppable. To say that this started almost 3 years ago and we are still on, you know, when Dr. Foma said it's going to be, you know, twice a month, I was like, are we going to be able to keep up? Like, how are we going to get speakers? Where are we going to get the topics to talk about? But it's like, there's not like all the time there's something always to talk about. And just the quality of the presentation is really second to none. And this just speaks as to the expertise that we all have. And I think that is something that when we look back, we should be very, very proud of ourselves as Cameroonians, as Africans, as global leaders, as scientists, as IT personnel, and all like. So a big kudos to us because we all did this together. And I hope that as we get into the new year, we continue to galvanize ourselves. We continue to have all these far-reaching conversations. I always look forward to the town hall. And as Elvis knows rightly, it is addictive. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Kenji, for your remarks. I don't know if the chair had some comments or remarks, Dr. Mono. Any thoughts on how you've seen this evolve in the...
Yeah, so I just want to thank all the participants and all the presenters for doing a wonderful job. Each day for me here is a learning process, as Kenji said. We had this conversation before, Kenji and I, Elvis, even including you, Brian. How should this go forward? Should we do it monthly? Should we do it every 2 weeks the way we're doing it? And are we going to be able to sustain this for a very long time? And as Kenji said, it's addictive to all of us. We come here, we scout to get experts. We are open to new ideas. And we have learned a lot. There are just so many highlights during this whole process and so many learning experiences for me in particular, even sitting here, being here every 2 weeks, it's just so important that I get to, like, I've been looking forward to this presentation, Elvis knows, and for the last 1 year, I've wanted this presentation. I think it's one of the best ways to end the year where we can really talk about how to improve the environment for research back home. Make sure that we're able to do research in an ethical way. There have been so many scandals in Africa, scandals in the US, scandals even in Cameroon. And as Professor Boguma said the other day, looking at research, looking at HIV research and the different ways which they were carried out, especially in Cameroon, the Truvada research, and you could realize that we have a lot to do. And we have a lot of ethical things to put in place. We have to discuss and encourage young scientists and actually finance them and get them sustainable. So, Brian, this to me is one of those things that I hope that a lot of young scientists are going to log in. And we're going to share this session really broadly. And I want to thank Elvis and his team, Dr. Yauba, who is not here, Chai, and all those who are collaborating with DAC-Africa project for bringing it to Cameroon in the first place. That's one of the most difficult things to do, to bring it to a French-speaking African country. Though Cameroon is bilingual, we know we are 80% French in the way things are broadcast, and French Africa has lacked any kind of real funding when it comes to deal with research. So without letting the cat out of the bag, early, I just wanted to say how excited I am to be here today. And I'll be in and out. I'm traveling to Denver for an oncology conference, but I cannot miss this for anything. So, Brian, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, for your comments, and thanks for those really inspiring and resounding message. We've all been looking forward to this conversation. I think Africa, as you said, really represents a really huge and untapped potential in clinical trials and clinical research overall. So we've really been looking forward to Dr. Elvis's remarks and comments today. And I hope it's going to engage a really exciting exchange as we think about the way forward. I think Elvis needs no introduction. Yeah, he needs no introduction, and it's really been an immense honor and immense pleasure to know him and to see the immense impact that he's had on the continent. So Elvis, take it away.
Yeah, thank you very much, Brian. Thank you, the chair of the Cameroon Town Hall, and thank you all dear participants of the Cameroon Town Hall for Healthcare Professionals for your resilience, for being here with us over the past 3 years. Muna, what's our number now in terms of all those who have attended at least one session?
Almost 3,000.
Good. And those are 3,000 healthcare professionals, a little few from other countries, but majority from Cameroon, who we all have their database, who have logged on our session. And each time we send a MailChimp, we are sure it reaches out to 3,000 healthcare professionals. So first, I want to really thank you all for being part of this, what we call now a movement. So today I'll be presenting on promoting clinical trial informativeness in Africa and the role of what you come to hear, DAC-Africa. And just to set your expectation, we have had a presentation here in the town hall where one of us was talking about the clinical research environment in Cameroon. And it was actually deep. He did a great job to just tell us about who is doing what and what are the challenges in Cameroon. So the presentation today is not going to dig deep into clinical research and what's happening, but more of a concept called informativeness. And as I go in my presentation, I want to set the expectation that we'll be talking about clinical trial informativeness, and we'll be dealing with what is less talked about, what we can do at the very early stage of when we think of conducting a clinical trials and what can be done, and the role of what DAC-Africa can do. And so I just want to set that precedent before the presentation. Okay, so the outline today, we're going to look at the background of what we are talking about clinical trial informativeness. We're going to talk about DAC-Africa, what is it, and what can DAC-Africa do? And we're going to get to a conclusion and, of course, our question and answer session. So at the end of this presentation, my hope is that we leave here with an understanding of the need for more informative clinical trials in Cameroon and what DAC-Africa can do to make this happen. And also to just let every participant of the town hall know about DAC-Africa in such a way that you can tell somebody about DAC-Africa, you can talk about the role DAC-Africa is playing to provide to African research community clinical trial protocol review service. So we want that at least everyone should know what DAC-Africa is and what it does. And at the end of the day, we will be able to share with you the review process of what we do. In fact, our main deliverable is to review clinical trial protocols. So we're going to really provide, just a flow of what that review process looks like. So let me start with a little background about informativeness. I had the first chance to learn about the word informativeness from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where I had the opportunity for the past 3 years to serve as a subject matter expert on DAC. So the first thing I would say is the word DAC stands for design, analyze, and communicate. And these are three important elements when you are dealing with clinical trial. You have to think about the design of your clinical trial. You have to think about how you will analyze your results, both interim and at the end of the trial. You have to think about how you communicate before and during and after the clinical trial. So design, analyze, and communicate is, part of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation Integrated Development Division, and it's being headed by the subdirector Thea Norman, who has worked hard to promote this concept of informativeness globally. So my first time to come, across the word clinical trial informativeness was when I was doing this work with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation as a subject matter expert. So DAC exists at the Gates Foundation, and their role there is to review clinical research protocols, mostly those that are funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So that is where the whole idea of DAC was born. But now, talking about clinical trial informativeness, let's look at what does this actually mean? And we've always tried to talk about this by starting with a negation. What is an uninformative clinical trial? Because if you understand what an uninformative clinical trial is, then it'll be easy to understand what an informative clinical trial is. And then the whole concept of informativeness will become very clear. So an uninformative trial is one that provides results that are not meaningfully used for a patient or a clinician or a researcher or a policymaker. So at the end of the day, why do we conduct clinical research? Why do we even get into research? It's because we want to improve on something, or because we want to promote something, or because we want to bring about a change. So if at the end of a research, that results cannot achieve any of this goal, then that research is considered uninformative. Then if you go to think about what an informative trial it is, then you think about one that is designed to have the best chance to complete on time, to answer the research questions, and also to effect a policy change, or maybe just to even lead you to a point where you can make a go or no-go decision, be it in a treatment decision or whatever health improvement decision. That will be an informative trial. So if you look at the way we put it, we start by letting you know what an informative trial is, so you can better have an understanding of what informativeness is all about. Okay, so just to paint a picture of a little bit of the problem, between 2009 and 2010, there were a total of about 125 randomized clinical trials on various topics, maybe including ischemic heart disease and lung cancer and diabetes, that were assessed just to think about informativeness. How many of these could meet the criteria of informativeness? And in this particular study, the informativeness was looked at through the lens of whether this trial completed on time, or whether it was registered, or how it was cited in some systematic reviews, or how, of what low risks of bias it had in its design. So those were the elements that were considered to qualify the trial, the randomized trial, as being informative. And out of the 125 randomized clinical trials, only 26 of these trials met all those 4 criteria of being informative. And even worst of all, those that were funded by private entities and government, and just about 6 of them ended up being informative. So we can see that a lot of clinical trials that are conducted worldwide, not just the problem of Africa, most of them end up being uninformative. Now let's paint the situation a little bit now in Cameroon. In Africa as a whole, we all know we have a fast-growing population, 1.4 billion people, and it's projected that by 2050, Africa will be about 2.5 billion people, and we bear about 25% of the global disease burden. And if you look at between 2015 and 2021, from the trials that were conducted in which 1 or 2 or more clinical sites were based in Africa, just about 2.5% of clinical trials within that period were conducted in Africa, or where Africa was one of the clinical trial sites. And if you look at this, that means we represent a very low percentage of generating clinical trials, or where clinical trials is taking place. And out of this, just if you can consider that 6 to 25% of trials end up being uninformative, from the previous slide, you saw about 26% of the trials were uninformative. If you take that range between 6 to 25 trials being on percentage of trials conducted being uninformative, then if we have just 2.5% of trials taking place in the continent, imagine if 6 to 25% of this 2.5 end up being uninformative. It means that, and then we are really at a very low stage of generating knowledge or conducting research that can actually improve health outcomes. So, but if you look at from COVID-19 pandemic, where a lot of clinical trials have been conducted till date, and also just the increased investment in building clinical trial infrastructure by different governments in Africa, including the African CDC and other international partners like the EDCTP, it is more likely that as the days go by, we are going to get more clinical trials being conducted in the continent. So it is important for us at this very stage to see how to ensure that these trials that are conducted in the continent are informative. And one of the main ways to ensure this is to really look at things from the very beginning, clinical trial design. How are these trials designed? And so you would realize that our work is focused at a very early stage of clinical research, at the very early stage where we think that something can be done with the design of the clinical trial. That is where DAC-Africa's role comes in. So the DAC-Africa now comes from the fact that we are talking about design, analyze, and communicate, but now not happening in Seattle at the Gates Foundation, but now happening in Africa. So the word DAC stands for design, analyze, and communicate, and then the A stands for Africa. So most often I'll talk about DAC-A's mission. So our mission is essentially born out of the incredible work that the BMGF is doing. Our mission is to promote clinical trial informativeness by just establishing an African network of clinical trial experts that can review clinical trial protocols and encourage PIs to apply best practices to ensure that the design of their trials is such that, you know, we can have more informative clinical trials in the continent. So as I mentioned, this is an inspiration that came from the BMGF, and of course, DAC-Africa is funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation as a pilot, just to see how we can sit this concept of informativeness in the continent and improving the quality of research that is being produced at the continent. So DAC's A objective is to promote informativeness as a foundational value for planning and running clinical trials in the continent. And so we hope to review clinical trial protocols and provide assistance to principal investigators that can help them optimize the design of their protocol with the concept of informativeness at the back of their mind. So we will provide African PIs with access also to some tools that can help them, you know, think about the best practices in design and implementation of clinical trials. And some of these tools are well adapted from the tools that exist at the level of Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, but that have been adapted to suit the reality of the African continent. And of course, to participate in any way we can to promote an enabling environment to conduct clinical trial in the continent. And we think about not just the clinical trials protocol review service, but we also have an interest in thinking about the regulatory pathways to conducting clinical trials and thinking about how DAC-Africa can support the regulators who are conducting protocol reviews, be it the ethics committees or the other regulators, to see how we can as well share some of the best practices and tools that DAC-Africa has developed with these regulators, so they can also conduct their review of clinical trial protocols with the concept of informativeness in mind. So as I mentioned, if you look at our work is at the very foundational core of our clinical trials. At the time when you are still designing a research protocol, that is where DAC-Africa comes in. Because at the end of the day, the whole continuum of conducting clinical trial is to improve health outcome. But we are intervening at a very early stage that if you, at the time of designing your clinical research protocol, think about informativeness, think about what health outcome will this trial, impact, or what are the questions, what are the design questions that you want to really think about as you go towards writing your protocol. So this is the very foundational core of the work we do. So we seek to act at the stage where the principal investigator still has the opportunity to optimize their design. So that's why you see it represented right there at the bottom. Now, this was just, first of all, an idea. And as Muno said, Muno had been insisting and said, Elvis, you have to do this presentation to talk about DAC-Africa. At the very early stage when the project was granted last November 2022, we could not have come to just talk about DAC-Africa as an aspiration, but we wanted to really get it launched and get it started and get protocol review before we can come to the town hall to tell, you know, all the members of the town hall about DAC-Africa. So in May this year, DAC-Africa was launched in Yaoundé, And this ceremony was graced by the Minister of Health. And we are also opportune to have some top officials of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, including the Director of IDEF, Integrated Development, and THEA, which I also mentioned, who is so passionate about, promoting clinical trial informativeness in Africa. So they were all in Cameroon with a whole panel of researchers and people who are all having a role to play in the clinical trial ecosystem in Cameroon and in Africa. A lot of people attended online. So DAC-Africa now is not longer on paper. It's a reality. It's already launched and it's functioning. And it's being hosted or implemented by the Clinton Health Access Initiative Cameroon office under the leadership of Dr. Yaoba Seydou. So this is one of the big milestones that we achieved this year. Now, let me take a pause now and just think about DAC-Africa. What do we do? I've set a context of how DAC-Africa was born. I've explained what problem we want to solve. But now let's look at how do we solve this problem? What does DAC-Africa actually do? So as I mentioned, we want to set informativeness as a foundational value for planning and running clinical trials in Africa. And our work spanned through the real definition of DAC itself: design, analyze, and communicate. So we want to be able to ensure that when clinical principal investigators are conducting their clinical trials, we want to see, are they asking the right question? Are they using standardized endpoints? Are they using modern simulation tools? If they are choosing a site to conduct a clinical trial, are they choosing the site based on disease burden, or what influenced their choice of a clinical research site? And what kind of methodologies are they using to plan their trials? That's all design questions that we are asking. Then when it goes to analysis, we want to be able to ask questions about if the PI has a statistical analysis plan in place, or if they plan to have one. And, are they having a biostatistician on their team? How can we help to make that happen? And as well, we want to look at communication issues in the review process. What do are they engaging with stakeholders before, during, and after the clinical trials? Who are the stakeholders? And we are even hoping that in the pipeline of some of the tools that are being developed by the Gates Foundation, we will also be able to have some templates or guidelines for communication during clinical trial implementation, which PIs can make use of as well. So how do we do this? We do this by bringing together, from across the entire African continent, experts, trusted authorities in the area of clinical trials who have really a wide range of experience to form what we call our review panel or expertise. So on our panel of expertise, these are all consultants that are paid on the project, coming from different countries. We have clinical research experts, regulatory expert, quantitative science expert, biostatistics, and experts in clinical pharmacology, epidemiology, and even those who are versed with implementation research, and also just those who have just experience doing a clinical trial in low and middle income countries. So we have these experts all that they have been contracted from different parts. They form our review panel. And so the first thing we do is we provide the review service for a protocol that has been submitted to us. And what's our deliverable? We give the principal investigator feedback, well-written feedback, written in a language that does not step on their egos, but that tell them that, look, we think these are the considerations that if you take or implement, you can actually come up with a robust design of your clinical trial. And at times in the review process, if we realize that this principal investigator has a very important research project, but maybe lacks some expertise on their team, maybe they need a biostatistician on their team, or maybe they need to conduct some clinical trial simulations, we can go as far as providing a grant that range from up to $30,000 to the PI to tell the PI, look, you need this clinical trial planning grants to hire these experts to help you optimize the design of your clinical trial protocol. So these are some of the two important things that DAC-Africa does. Now, the question that should be in your mind, especially for those who are conducting research, should be, what kind of research do these people, protocols do these people review? What kind of protocol? Are they student theses? What kind of protocol can we send to them? So DAC-Africa can review phase 1 to phase 4 in clinical trials, protocols, as well as even, observational studies, implementations studies. We can even review health technology assessment studies, right? Like if you develop an app that can maybe influence maternal health and you want to do a randomized control trial on testing the functionality of the app, we can as well review those protocols because then they have, the potential to improve health outcomes. So we have a wide range of kind of protocols that we can review. But then another criteria that we use in order to accept protocols for review is we want to be able to review a protocol that the PI has already secured funding or is at the verge of securing funding. But most recently, a protocol that we just decided, a protocol that maybe the principal investigator is, the trial is very important, that we think that even without funding, the principal investigator can have the opportunity to secure funding if we do the review for the protocol and give it some more credibility. So that's just to ensure that we do not waste the huge resources that we pay all the consultants to do a protocol review and then end up not having the trial being implemented. And it would not also help us because we will not be able to measure the impact of our review services and to know what are some of those comments or review feedback that the principal investigators have implemented. And also, one of the considerations that we want to be able to make before we accept a protocol is that the protocol should be at a stage where the PI still has some potentials or capability to make changes, right? If you have a protocol that has already gone through ethics review, had approval, and is set to go on the field, there is no need for review for DAC-Africa because most of the comments we make will not be implemented because then you need to go back to ethics to review, to file for another ethical clearance for any changes that we made in the protocol. So the stage at which the protocol comes to us for review is very important. And very important, the location, DAC-Africa, of course, you expect that we'll review protocols that are conducted or that the trials are conducted in Africa, though we are flexible to admit some multi-site trials that maybe might have other sites out of Africa, but then that have some African PIs participating in it. That could also be some level of flexibility that we can have. So that welcomes protocols to review from a wide range of different areas. So if you were thinking about what kind of protocol, I hope that these slides actually answers your question, but I can come back to other further questions during the Q&A session. So now let's look at the review process. How does this happen? I would take a scenario with Kenji. Let's imagine that Kenji is a principal investigator and he has a protocol and he wants to assess dengue fever in Africa, and he has some rapid diagnostic tests he wants to use, and he thinks that his protocol should be evaluated by DAC-Africa. From listening to this presentation, Kenji has the email address of DAC-Africa, so Kenji sends an email to the program manager and say, I have a protocol. I think that you guys can, I'll be glad to benefit from DAC-Africa review. So the next thing the program manager will do will be to set up a meeting, which we call an alignment meeting with Kenji, so that we meet with the entire DAC team and go through and ask question, what's your protocol about? What kind of, does it meet our eligibility? Once we are aligned that the protocol is one which we can review, then there is a follow-up that is sent to Kenji, asking him to fill some questionnaires, which are part of the tools that I'm going to talk about. One of them is a DAC assessment tool. It's just a set of questionnaires that answer some key questions that we use during our review. So he's going to answer the questionnaire. He's going to submit to us his protocol with all associated documents for review. And we now have a digital portal, which I'll talk about, which he can submit a protocol through a secure digital portal where we can both communicate with the PI using that portal that has been developed by one of our technology experts in South Africa, Novotech. So Kenji submits his protocol to us with all the DAC assessment tool already completed. Then it gets into a complete review series. And our panel of experts selected for that review based on their competence are sent the copies through the portal, the secure portal. They get into the review session. They take some time to go through the review. They write their comments based on the different expertise that they are looking at the protocol. And this comment is written on an Excel sheet called an opportunity list or points to consider. And we now sit in a meeting and we review all those comments as experts, subject matter experts. We align to make sure comments are well graded. There are some comments that are high criticality comments, low criticality comments, just comments that we think that that can, if implemented, can let the principal investigator conduct a trial that will be informative. So these comments are then channeled to the principal investigator, who goes through them and provides some feedback to us, maybe through an email before we set up a meeting with the PI where we communicate the finding and hear from the PI, some thoughts. Maybe we could have asked some questions that the PI already has an answer, but it was not reflected in the protocol. That's an opportunity to discuss with the PI our comments. And most often you'll find the PIs really accept and say, this is very helpful. Thank you. We're going to consider it. But in some cases, they can say, oh, we thought about this, but this was a challenge. And we all discuss and look at the best course of action that the PI can take. And after that, we go back with the feedback that we've had from the PI meeting. We prepare a final document, which is now called the opportunity list document, which is like our main deliverable, which we now give to the principal investigator. Of course, there is no obligation for him to take what we have asked him to do. It's a service we are providing, hoping that we can help him optimize his protocol design and to help him, conduct a trial that will be informative. So if you look at in terms of timing, for a protocol to go through DAC-Africa review, it takes about 5 weeks averagely from the time we have the alignment meeting till the time we are having the final meeting with the PI or the sponsor. Here I've been using the word PI, but most essentially we'll have meetings with sponsors, because sponsors tend to be those who really think that DAC-Africa service could be very important for them because they are sponsoring the trial and they want to get their return on investment. And so they want that trial to be very successful and informative. So we can either have a meeting with the PI or the sponsor, depending on whom we are engaging with. So on week 1, as I mentioned, the subject matter experts, the group, after the documents have been submitted, they do their review. Week 2, it goes to senior review. So we have a set of senior reviewers. These are senior scientists that have had a really, really long career in clinical trial and clinical research. They go through all the comments that have been made by the subject matter experts. They provide their deep insights. And after the review by the senior reviewers, we meet in another meeting where we call it a huddle meeting between the senior reviewers and the subject matter experts. They discuss all those comments and they align and agree. And from there, they prepare and meet with DAC leadership. DAC leadership meeting on week 4 is just to make sure that the leadership of DAC-Africa knows what review is in the pipeline, to have visibility and to know if there were some issues during the review process that can be handled, maybe operational issues and stuff like that. And at the end, the last week is the week with the PI or the sponsor. So this is just to paint a picture of the review process, and we want to make it really robust as possible. So at the time you are submitting your protocol for review, at least you have an anticipated wait time of 5 weeks to get that go through our pipeline of review process. So this slide is just a glimpse of some of the kind of experts we have regrouped from across the continent with really, really great experience and demonstrated expertise in clinical research. We have Mohamed Afolabi, who is one of our senior reviewers from London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. He's a Nigerian. We have Bernard Ongotu, who is also one of our senior reviewers. We have Jude Bigoga, our own from Cameroon, Fomla, who is our clean farm from South Africa, Kennedy, our Baostars from South Africa, and Linda from Kenya. This is just a few of them. We have other subject matter experts that have already been contracted. And of course, we keep recruiting people that have this expertise that can provide review service. So if you think that you have the expertise that you can provide the review service, you can reach out to be a subject matter expert with DAC-Africa, and we can as well look at your work and see if we can add you on our panel of consultants. Of course, they are paid for their hours. So now I'll talk about some tools, because these reviewers are not just left to review based on their experience at their work site. There are some tools that they use to guide them as they go through the review process, because at the end of the day, they are reviewing with one thing in mind: informativeness. So in the review process, there are general questions that a reviewer will want to ask as they are reviewing the protocol. What's the scientific question that this researcher is trying to address? At what phase of development, if it's a clinical trial, and what decision is being made on the study data? You just ask some general question. And when you go to the DAC question, that's the design, analyze, and communicate, you start asking design questions like, the population where the trial will take place, is how was it selected? Is it based on disease burden? What are the clinical trial endpoints and how were they established? You ask questions about biostatistics, sample size, rationale, basis for effect size and all that. And you go to analysis questions, statistical analysis plan. Are there interim plans or, are there some model informed drug development in place? You just ask design questions before you go to communicate. What are the communication strategy? Are they engaging the community before, during, and after the trial? Are there plans to do so? Is the clinical trial going to be registered, and how will it be published? What are the identified journals that have been earmarked for publication at the end of the trial? So that's just the tool that we use in reviewing clinical trial, which is a DAC assessment tool, which we just discussed. Now, another tool is the best practice. This is my best of the tools because this was carefully designed over years of research by the Gates Foundation. And I think this is really one of their proprietary documents, which we use because I think they design it. They call it the 16 best practices for clinical trial informativeness. And if you look at the 16 best practices, these are approaches that can make all clinical studies more likely to be informative. So we believe that if you, as a clinical researcher, think about designing your clinical research with these 16 best practices in mind, there are high chances that your trial will get to be informative. And if you look at how the 16 best practices are written, it follows the same acronym of design, analyze, and communicate. So for the first 6 questions, you see, we're asking design questions, purely design questions. Did you prioritize disease burden and epidemiology as criteria for site selection? Did you use acceptable endpoints when you were designing? What are the proactive strategy you've taken to map outcome or maybe to ultimate policy? How will your research translate to policy? And we asked analysis question. Are you analyze real-world evidence to optimize study investment and objectives? Prior to study initiation, complete a prospective and fixed statistical analysis plan. We talk about design interim analysis with decision rules for stopping, for success or futility, so things that you have to consider as far as analysis is concerned. And we even talk about using staff with experience in the therapeutic area being studied. You don't want to go do an oncology study and all the staff that are involved are all paid, maybe those who are doing some diabetic work with no idea on oncology. So you have to use staff that have experience in the therapeutic area and adhere to some appropriate standards of GCP, including, monitoring of participant safety and study integrity. All those are analysis questions. And then you go to communication. You want to ask about, engagement with local regulators, ethics committees, implement a communication plan and inform consent with families, communities, and health systems. So you talk about where the study will be published. So this tool is very important, and I hope that we're going to share this tool to all town hall members. It's open. Our hope is to make sure that many people get this as much as possible as they design their trial, so they can continuously use this best practice for clinical trial informativeness. So at the end of the day, what's our value proposition as DAC-Africa? I want to look at it from 4 different stakeholders. Let's look at the funder, the funded PI teams. If you are a PI and you are funded, how important is DAC-Africa to you? First of all, our review services are free. Isn't that incredible? Like, you can imagine the amount of work that goes into reviewing one clinical trial protocol, the cost involved to pay all the consultant, but this is done for free. 2, we increase the likelihood that your study is going to answer the question that you set forth to answer. So that's the dream of every PI, right? You want to make sure that your trial answer the question that you set out to investigate. From the side of the funder is putting in money, right? So the funder will be thinking about the greater return for investment for their trial that they are funding if the trial ends up informatively. So this work we are doing for the side of the funder, the thing that is going to help them improve their return on investment, and the study that are more likely to improve health outcomes. The funder is funding the study because they want to provide some impact, improve health outcomes. So if it is informative, then it helps them achieve that goal of improving health outcomes. For the level of the regulator, the work we are doing is important because then the best practices tools that we are circulating is helping them too, to support them, be it at the level of regulatory review or ethics review. They are now having all these tools, the DAC assessment tool, which are being customized to suit their kind of review, and also the best practices which they can use to conduct their own review. But most importantly, at the level of the participants and the community, right? Fewer people will be exposed to non-effective treatment if we design protocols in a way that can lead to informative trials. And there'll be increased likelihood of a positive experience and trust, right? When you build a clinical trial and conduct them and people feel comfortable at the end, then there is trust for more clinical trial to be conducted in that community. So I think if you ask a question, these are the value proposition of DAC-Africa. And I think that's where I really want to end this presentation. But at the end of the day, I want you to look at DAC-Africa as a resource for clinical trial institution sponsors in the continent. And it's a hub or a network that promotes clinical trial in the continent, looking at it from the very foundational base of clinical trial design. And we want to say that this is from Cameroon to Africa, by Africans, for Africans. That's why it left Seattle to Africa. And I really want to give a lot of credit to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and most especially to the Deputy Director of IDEF, Dea Norman, for interest in promoting clinical trial informativeness across the world, and specifically in Africa, and for making sure that this grant, which is a 3-year pilot, was successful. And we hope that it's going to continue post 3 years. And also most credit to the Clinton Health Access Initiative for providing leadership in implementing this grant. And above all, to the program team on the ground headed by Dr. Clarence Mbanga, who did a great job to put the slides together for the incredible work they are doing. I want to say we have already reviewed one protocol that went through a complete review from the time DAC was launched to now. It's not been a long time. And we have as goal to review 10 to 15 protocols in 2024. So we have a wide range, and we have opportunity to provide clinical trial planning grants of up to 30,000 for those that we find they are protocol eligible. So this is a service for you, and I hope that we can all come together to contribute in different ways to improve on the clinical trial ecosystem in Africa, taking one thing and doing that can improve the ecosystem. And I hope that my presentation was that which maybe provided what you expected. If not, I'm open for some questions and answers. Thank you.
Yeah, that was powerful and deeply insightful. I don't know if Kate is around. It was really informative. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Elvis, for delving into this. This whole concept of informativeness did not really occur to me until you really untangled it in this really amazing way. So thanks a lot. There's been a lot of feedback in the chat. I'm sure you've been, I don't know if you had a chance to look, but lots of feedback. So I'm sure we'll delve into that. I want to introduce and pass on the moderation to Dr. Kate. Kate, welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. I don't know if you can hear me clearly, Brian.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much, Elvis. I was listening to a beat on my phone while I was on the way heading home. So I was just so privileged to finally see some of the slides concerning DAC. I've been hearing a lot about it, and obviously really, really great work. I'm just so thrilled in what, in the whole conception of the idea and what you and your team, you've been able to develop from Cameroon, as you rightly said, to Africa for Africans, to be used by Africans, hopefully. So I think we are just going to open this up for questions and answers, for comments as well. And if you have any questions or comments, that is our custom, you just have to raise up your hand, like Franklin has done already, or you can put in the chat. And I'm going to be switching from people who've raised hands to some of the comments and questions in the chat as well. So, but I'll start, Elvis. So from when I first heard about DAC, I really thought it was all around providing some sort of ethical guidelines for research and for clinical trials in Africa. But from what I'm seeing today from your slides, it's really far-reaching. It's all about getting that protocol ready. So my question is, after the review from DAC, does DAC have capacity for ethical approval, or the PI has to take that review from DAC and then now go to the different individual countries where the trials are supposed to take place and ask for ethical approval?
Great, that's a very interesting question, Dr. Kate, and I think that comes from someone who is conducting research who understands, the process very well. I'm really happy for that question. I think we are doing the scientific review of the protocol, right? Making sure that the design is really appropriate, and that's very fundamental, very important before the PI even goes to approach to ask for ethics review. And our hope is that the protocol comes to us before they go to ethics review. And our work can really facilitate the ethics review, because in our review process, we also catch questions around ethics, right? We don't focus so much on the ethics because we understand that it's going to go through ethical review, and we might not want to bother so much to lay emphasis on ethics, but we still ask questions related to ethics, which we think form part of our review comments to the principal investigator, hoping that if he implements those questions and address them, then his protocol is going to go through the ethics review very smoothly. And we're thinking about also, as we get into this work, the kind of collaboration that we can have with ethics committees, so that ethics committees can understand the value that DAC is providing as far as the review process is concerned, and maybe even call us in some of the ethics committees to help them with scientific review process, so they pay attention to the ethics review. Because I think I've served in an ethics committee, right? I had an advanced training in bioethics, and I served at the Biotechnology Center in Elvis on ethics committee, where we used to review research protocols and issue ethical clearance. And I realized that in our review team on ethics, the science was one of the things that we had to review, because they say when the science is bad, the ethics is bad as well, right? And so sometimes ethics committees might not even have capacity to adequately review the science. And so we're thinking about a situation where we can get into that collaboration and partnership, where we can help ethics committee do the scientific review aspect of their review to help them focus on the ethics and make their work easier. So those are some thoughts that are in the pipeline. But I think, to answer your question directly, we will welcome protocols that have to leave from DAC-Africa review to the ethics for ethical clearance.
Yeah, thank you so much, Elvis. I think I'll go first to Franklin, then I'm going to go later to some of the questions in the chat.
Yeah, thank you, Kati, for giving me the time to talk. Yeah, great presentation, Mr. Ndansi. Yeah, I'm sorry that I could not put on my camera to really thank you for this. Yeah, one thing I've admired about you is that you always move to the next level. And the truth is, we have been doing a lot of research in Africa. And one time I was reflecting, like, what has this research really done on us? We have been working on malaria for many years. What have we gotten as Cameroonians from all this research project? Even as students, we have a lot of projects that we have written. They are still just there on the counter of many professors. What are we benefiting from this result? So my simple question is that some of this research that are abandoned or that have even been published, they have vital data that most of us have not even tried to go back through to see what we can benefit from that and to better things up. So do DAC go back to some of these past publications or try to look to some of these protocols from students to see how they can ameliorate them to give meaningful results that can benefit humanity, especially in the context of Cameroon? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Franklin, for such a great question. Like I mentioned, we're working with principal investigators and funders that have a protocol that for something that is still about to happen, so we can influence it and make sure that we provide our feedback and review service and make sure that they can make changes and optimize their protocol to lead to informativeness of their trial. But one tool that I may have not mentioned in my presentation, which is also a tool that was developed by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, is called the Target Policy Profile. The Target Policy Profile is just another tool that helps the PI to think through the policy journey and how the outcome of your research will be adopted to policy. From the very early stage that you are designing your study, you already start thinking about the policy change that the outcome of your study is going to bring. And so there's a whole target policy profile, which is a tool that can be used by principal investigators to map through that journey and actually have clarity as to what health outcome impact their study is going to have. And that tool is also available. We can share with the rest of the team, just so that they have access to it. And if you're conducting a clinical trial that you hope is going to create a very great health outcome, you can as well use the target policy profile to think through, the policy aspect and adoption issues just at a very early stage of the design of your protocol, by knowing which stakeholders to engage with and how to get their buy-in at a very early stage before you even get into conducting a clinical trial protocol. Let's take, for example, if you're conducting a trial on sulfadoxine pyrimethamine as for intermittent prevention of malaria in pregnancy, and if you're trying to increase from maybe a 2-dose to a 3-dose, maybe you want to time some time points within that. If you don't engage with your policy, if you hope that is going to change and improve health outcome, if you don't engage with the policy makers early on in the design phase, what motivates you to think that maybe after your results, somebody's going to make use of that result? So that's what the target policy profile can ask you some very key questions, which if you answer those questions, you can actually really do a lot, even at a very early stage of your design, to prepare for policy adoption before even going into conducting your research.
Yeah, please, Kati, I'm sorry that I'm still in the stage again. Yeah, I want to just follow up with something. Mr. Ndansi, like the case of Professor Victor Namangu, he came out with something that they were claiming at that time, or they were saying that it could treat HIV. I think that was a protocol. I don't know what has ended with that research. And secondly, there's this one with Father Cleda during the COVID period that came with a medication that was helping in COVID. How is that trying to look into this stuff and to look into this protocol to see if truly they came out with something that could actually help the humanity, especially in this type of diseases? Yeah, thank you. Because Professor Malangu is no more there. I don't know if the research just died, or you guys can still go back to this interesting stuff to bring out back PIs who can work on this. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Franklin. Like I mentioned, very interesting concern there. But DAC-Africa's work is not retrospective, it's progressive. We only go towards protocols that have been designed to take place. And unless maybe some other researcher picks up on the protocol that Professor Anomango was working on and decides to continue with the work and think that they want to take a different dimension of the work and they think that DAC-A can review the protocol, that's when our service will be very valuable for them. But I think it's an important concern. But for the scope of DAC-Africa, we are focused on, the work that still has to be done and being able to intervene at the very early stage of the protocol development to make sure that our advice can be taken by the PIs.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Franklin, for those questions. And I think if you were here 2 weeks ago, some of the issues around Professor Anomango's therapeutic vaccine, as he called it himself, back in those days, were touched. And I think Professor Boguma shed some light on that. And we can always talk about that off this session. So, but there is an interesting question from Julie Mason. I think she has written a lot in the chat. And I'm just going to grab her first question. She said, this is amazing. And she wants to know how DAC-Africa is being marketed and whether Cameroonian or other African PIs are already aware of the existence of DAC-Africa.
Thank you very much. This is one of the marketing platforms, if you ask me. We recognize the fact that we need to do a lot of marketing to make sure that people know about DAC-Africa's work. The team on the ground has been doing some scoping, and they did some scoping of who is doing what in Africa as far as clinical research is concerned. and they kind of pull out the data and send out emails to some of them. That's even how we got to get the first protocol that we reviewed. It came from just some PI who got contacted through our search that the team did, and through the effort they are doing to communicate to PIs and those doing research in the continent. But I think there is a lot of work to be done, and I think all of you on this platform are ambassadors of DAC-Africa. One of the objectives of this presentation is just to put the word out there so that if you also know researchers that are conducting research in the continent and that you think they can benefit from the services of DAC-Africa, you can as well help us to communicate this. But I think we have also been part of other gatherings where those involved in research gather to or converge. We were in Paris last month for the EDCTP conference, where we had a lot of stakeholder engagements with EDCTP and other researchers that came for the convening of EDCTP in Paris. And I think we're also in Lusaka for the African Public Health Conference, where we also had the opportunity to engage with some stakeholders. And I think apart from some of this international gathering, we need to also still organize some local gatherings back home in Cameroon to educate PIs on the service. And I think we're planning some of those events in 2024 locally in Cameroon, where we can still get some PIs to converge and hear about the work that DAC-Africa is doing. But as I mentioned, we have a LinkedIn page, very active. We put comments on clinical trial informativeness every Wednesday. So if you follow us on LinkedIn page, you're going to get a lot of resources and thoughts around clinical trial informativeness. And we're going to also get our landing page on the clinical trial community, which is also a platform that it has a lot of clinical trial stakeholders engaging there, and that when that happens, we'll share the link as well with the team. But really, really great question, and I hope that each and every one of you will be ambassadors of DAC-Africa.
Yeah, Elvis, I think, okay, Brian, maybe before you come in, I think there's, Elvis talked about the scope of clinical trials. I think Julie's second question, which I've gone further down, was trying to touch the scope. And Elvis, you mentioned that you and your team have done some sort of a scoping work to find out where clinical trials are currently carried out in Africa. I don't know if you have that information of your sleeves, but if you can just give us some highlights of what is happening with regards to clinical trials. You said, for example, how many clinical trials occur on the African continent? You might not have a very precise number yet. Can you share more about organizations or efforts you are aware that might be helping advocate for more clinical trials? So,
well, I think the team, the criteria they were using to do the scoping was really not much on the number of clinical trials and where they are conducted, but they rather went into also publications and who has published what and where. And they rather were like, they did a scoping, look at all the top publications on clinical trials, who are those PIs, and how many publications does each of them have, and they kind of skewed down that data and came to the top of those trialists that they thought were people that are actively involved in clinical trial, and they use a time period, right, which was not more than 5 years, so that could help them still be able to get those who were actively involved in clinical trial within the time space that we're looking at. So that's the data that they use in order to contact the PIs. I think we still have another scoping that was done that was able to just look at who is doing what in Africa, who are the funders of clinical trial in Africa, and where are these trials taking place. There are some of those information that are also available, which I might not give specifics, but I think we also had some work early on in the life of DAC-Africa. That work was done.
Yeah, great. Brian?
Yeah, no, thanks, Kate. I was just really thrilled to hear about your participation in the Cephire conference in Lusaka, Zambia. I think that's really an exciting opportunity to strategically connect with other professionals across the continent who are doing this kind of high-level work. And I was also thrilled to hear about your engagement with EDCTP as well. And I think even including other conferences like ESCMH and things like that could be excellent opportunities to so people are more aware of what DAC is doing and the progress that you're making. But my question to you, Elvis, is really about how you're envisioning integrating this diverse methodology. I think someone asked in the chat about the how you're going to integrate DACA into already the existing review committees that already exist in Africa, and how you intend to work together, because we do have across the continent, we have diverse approaches to how this is being done, and I'm just curious around how you intend to integrate this diverse methodologies in this project.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, Brian, considering that reviews occur at different stages, right? You have the regulatory reviews and you have ethics reviews, and then you just have internal review that occur in some clinical research groups where they go through their own internal review of their protocol before they actually get to get it out there. What we think that makes DAC-Africa different is that we are reviewing the protocol with one objective in mind: clinical trial informativeness. We're looking at the informativeness aspect of the review process, and we want to use all those tools and those frameworks and those best practices and ask this question: what are the risks of this trial ending uninformatively? And how can these risks be mitigated? If the risks are risks that concern design issues, we want to be able to make sure that we are able to identify them early on. If there are issues that have to do with a statistical analysis plan, if a trial is not well powered, then it's not going to answer the question that is set out to answer, then how can we help the PI to get to think around how to power their design, and look at sample size issue. Maybe they need an expert, and then we provide a clinical trial planning grant. You see, in designing a very important clinical trial protocol, PIs can't do this work solo. It has to be a really big team to design a protocol. And if in your team, maybe you don't have the cost of money to pay a biostat, it means that you are going to neglect biostat issues because you're going to assume that you can do it very well internally, but then it could just be some service that you can outsource to a biostat expert to come on your team and really help you to think through all that at the very early stage of your design. And that's why our review process is a little different, because it's capturing all those issues that can affect clinical trial informativeness, right? And we can add value, and some of those internal protocols that have been reviewed by the internal team, we can add value because these are external reviewers. They have no affiliation with the PI. You have somebody reviewing your clinical farm, a clean farm reviewing your trial from South Africa, a biostat reviewing your trial from Kenya, and maybe an epidemiologist reviewing your trial from Cameroon, and each of them looking through the lens of what the thing informativeness would look like for your trial and providing feedback to you. So first, I think it's kind of unique in its way, but we will really be glad to disseminate the clinical trial informativeness tools, to other review services, so that they can make use of it as they continue to do their review, right? Our concept is not to be a monopoly of a review for informativeness, but rather to share the idea of clinical trial informativeness in the continent, and to make sure that people can design their trial with that concept in mind, and that if other review services can make use of some of the tools that we have, be it the DAC assessment tool, the best practices, the TPOP document, if they can make use of it, then it's still for the good of clinical trial in Africa.
Yeah, that's true. We have Nuella. Yes, Nuella, please go on.
Yeah, so Elvis, thank you so much for the presentation.
Nuella, if you're speaking, you're muted.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, can you get me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Elvis, for the presentation. I think it's really an eye-opener because, let's say talking about clinical trial is something which is almost like far to reach to many of us health personnel. So it's really good to hear from you. And I want to really find out if there are other review boards or other institutions in Africa that actually do this same thing that you do, or maybe you're like maybe the only one that does it in Africa or the other institutions that does that. It's really going to be good to know about other things. That's good. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Noella, for that question. Review itself is not a new word, and reviewing clinical trial protocol is nothing new. It's something that has been done by different people in different ways, different institutions, different services. But I think DAC-Africa is the pioneer in Africa to come with a service that is providing first protocol review for PIs that have nothing to do with DAC-Africa, but we're just providing a service to them. We are not their sponsors. We are not their partners in any way. We're just providing an independent review. And secondly, it's free of charge. I don't know which of those services are doing that is free as well. Then thirdly, we are doing it with one thing in mind, clinical trial informativeness, which we don't yet know if there is another review service that is having the same kind of tools that DAC-A is having, or that is reviewing with the same concept of informativeness in mind. But I think there could be other people that I don't know of. But I think that our hope is that review is not a new thing. Protocol review is not that new. We are not the first to review protocols, but I think we could just be the first to be doing it the way we are doing it.
Yeah, that's true, Elvis. I think there is a question in the chat from Marta. I mean, it's a straightforward one. Is DAC-Africa the sole registry of all clinical trials in the African continent? From what I get, DAC is not a registry, but go on, Elvis.
No, we are not a registry. We are not a clinical trial registry, and we work with high confidentiality with all the PIs that send their protocol to us. So I can't disclose here that we receive a protocol from this PI or from that PI, because we want to keep our review services and the confidentiality of the protocols really, really high. So we are not a registry, but I think there are very important registries too in the continent. I think we know about the South African Clinical Trial Regulatory Agency, or there are some of them that we heard in some presentations in the past from the African Medical Journal.
Yeah, that's important. And just to add to that, is your review blinded in DAC, Elvis? Is it a blinded review? Will the PI know? It's true, we can see who are your senior reviewers, but is the review process in itself blinded, where the PI would not know who amongst the team of DAC has reviewed, or is it open?
It's open, but at the time when we write the review comments, right? When we come to the huddle meeting with the senior reviewer, our comments are identified. I mean, the comments of the subject matter expert is identified with their initials, so we know who wrote the comment. Then we can discuss that and agree. But once we come up with the final comments that are going to the PI, you will not say that this comment came from Elvis or from Joel or from Peter.
Definitely.
You will see the comments from the entire review team, but cannot identify who made that comment.
Yeah, definitely. I see.
Yeah.
That's great. And Brian, just to the question about registry, there is the Pan-African Clinical Trials Registry, and we are as Africans, we are really encouraged to use and to promote that registry as well, which has been built, in Africa, I think in collaboration with South African, I think Cochrane Services, as mentioned, WHO, to use that registry to register trials that are to be taken in Africa. I think the other very popular one is the clinicaltrial.gov, which of course is NIH related. So I think that was just to matter about registry. Yeah, go on, Brian.
Yeah, it's just so actually on the same point, and I'm just curious, how do you balance the need for open science so people are aware of what's going on, and also the protection of people's intellectual properties? How do you draw the line between both? That transparency and open science in terms of methodologies and what's going on, and also really protecting the intellectual properties of the researchers.
Yeah, like I mentioned before, all our subject matter experts have signed a confidentiality agreement with DAC-Africa. So none of the protocol they review, they cannot share it. They cannot provide information out of the review about the protocol. And so they are binded by that clause in their contract. And so we hope that that effort is aimed at protecting the intellectual property of the principal investigator and making sure that nothing filters out of the review team about their protocol. That's the first thing. But the generous aspect of DAC-Africa is just the work that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation have done to make sure that some of these tools that would have rather maybe been given some proprietary mark and kept, but they have made it open for people to uptake them and use them across the continent, like the DAC assessment tool, like the best practices for clinical trials, like the TIPOP documents. These are really incredible documents that they've spent a lot of money to pay experts to come together to put, and then they put it like open resource out there for people to uptake and use it to optimize their clinical trial design. So I think that's the effort they can do as far as open science is concerned, but also encouraging principal investigators to publish their results, right, of their trials. So that's why in the best practice, one of the last best practices about communication, we want to ask question, where do you intend to publish this trial? And just to make sure that results about that trial can be known by the open world, so people know what's happening.
Yeah, that's really, really impressive.
Even if they are negative results.
And one of the very interesting thing about a clinical trial is what we call negative result. If a negative result is proving the fact that something cannot work, then it is a positive result in the clinical trial world, because if you did not do that trial, nobody will know that it cannot work. So the informativeness is not about whether a trial ended up maybe whether it was a negative or positive in that sense. It could still be a negative result that maybe a molecule that was being tested for efficacy proved not to be efficacious. That's not a negative result. It has proven that it's not efficacious so that someone else doesn't use it. And so no one else come to put results on that same process, right? But then if the design was, everything was good and it set out to prove that it cannot work, then it's still a successful study because it has just proved the null hypothesis wrong.
Yeah, that looking at it from the eye of the sponsor can be very painful, especially with negative results, especially for people who are around pharma.
It could be very important. It could be very painful if your trial does not end on time as it was anticipated, or if the trial end up unsuccessful because it was inadequately powered, or because there were some issues of design. That's even more painful because those are things that will be corrected, right? But if it is ending and we see that the safety profile of the candidate vaccine is very low and the vaccine cannot be used, of course, you needed a trial to prove that can be used. And so it's painful that it will not lead to any big business, but of course, it's a successful trial in another sense.
Yeah, which is what at DAC-Africa you are trying to mitigate, by catching some of these errors or loopholes that might induce a negative result early on, so that the trial is effectively robust. And even as Mona just put in the chat, negative results need to be published and communicated. It is very informative. It is one of the biggest problems in science. And that is important, especially when you're doing, for example, if you're doing a meta-analysis of clinical trials, in terms of levels of evidence, you obviously need all those results, whether positive or negative, to be able to collate evidence in a very robust manner. Brian and then George.
Maybe I was thinking of maybe going after George, but I wanted to a little bit segue and talk a little bit about some of the really powerful successes of the last 3 years. The recovery trial platform, I think, I don't know, Kati, if you can comment about that. I think that was a very, very successful platform from the UK that really helped to bring to light some of the major, I think, therapeutic agents that was used during the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly the success of dexamethasone, and knowing pretty early on what dosage was really most effective in terms of reducing mortality at the rate at which it does, and also showing that certain medications were not effective, like hydroxychloroquine, etc. So I think that kind of platform being generated and something that we can deploy rapidly should we have another, an emerging threat and require to do very rigorous, scientifically rigorous studies in a very short period of time. So how to extend that kind of platform in the continent and how we can build that was kind of what I was thinking. And I know CEPI is kind of involved in that, but I'm not very sure in terms of their engagement in Africa, working with the Africa CDC. I know they are trying to engage and have those conversations. CEPI stands for the Center for Epidemic and Pandemic. I forget what the I stands for, but again, they're trying to see how to build that. But how far are we from, do you think, Elvis, I don't know, Kate, if you're more informed about this, but I really consider the recovery trial platform to have been a success. Solidarity too was great, which was set up by the World Health Organization with these multiple stakeholders. But I feel like the recovery trial platform really stood up to speed. And really led by amazing clinical trialists from the UK. So I just wanted to invite your thoughts, Elvis or Kate, if you're more informed about that.
Yeah, I think Kate can talk a little more about the recovery trial, but I think CEPI is a very important stakeholder to DAC-Africa. We have had meetings with CEPI, and we are also engaging CEPI to see how they can also benefit from the services of DAC-Africa when it comes to trials that are funded by CEPI in Africa. So they are very important stakeholders to that we've had engagement with. But I think maybe Kate might want to talk about the recovery trial. Platform.
I really chose not to know anything about the recovery, apart from the fact that we are expecting a particular medication to help us during the COVID time. But I mean, what we know about the recovery was really a complex clinical trial setup, looking at the effectiveness of different therapeutic agents at the same time, going on in the UK and in other European countries. So, as you rightly said, Brian, it was delivered in such a very cost-effective manner in the UK using commonly available agents. Obviously, dexamethasone came out of the recovery as one of that was the best thing that came out of the recovery trial, especially regarding severe or moderate to severe COVID. So really, in terms of how it was set up and ran, really, I really have no idea apart from this information, which is publicly available. All we know it was really a complex. Mono has put some very long stuff in the chat about recovery that people can read for themselves.
Yeah, I think it was a really huge initiative and a really huge success. Before COVID-19, I had not really heard about this, and I thought it was a pretty remarkable. And thanks, Dr. Mono, for sharing what you shared in the chat. I think there are lots of lessons that we can potentially learn from the recovery trial, and I hope that platform was a similar platform for vaccine was also available. But unfortunately, I think that was mostly for therapeutics. But if we had those kinds of platform, and I think the expertise from some of the PI on the recovery trial could be leveraged for really a lot of things. And I'm thinking about the integration with what you're doing, Elvis. That I think would be a great
Brian, if you can hear me, I know I'm driving to the airport. What is amazing about the recovery trial is that it taught us how to do science. I'll go back to this, it's very important. It taught us how to do science. In less than no time, no one, like the British, could set up a whole system where you could not just give patients drugs, run all of this through a clinical trial the same way we do in oncology. Meaning the UK system was set up in such a way that they were not just giving medications to patients out of emotion. They set up a clinical trial protocol which was open, addictive, and also they could add on the protocol based on different levels of evidence. So the first things that were tested were antiretrovirals. In less than no time, the recovery trial told us they were not working. They added hydroxychloroquine to the protocol. They told us it was not working. They added dexamethasone, and they were the first to tell us that dexamethasone actually works in reducing mortality. We had ideas about this in New York City, and we had started using corticosteroids. Then they were still the first to tell us that all other steroids can be, if their dose is adapted to dexamethasone. They were the first to tell us also, when the ACT trial came out, they added baricitinib, they added tocilizumab, they added plasma, and they added everything you could imagine ongoing throughout the whole of the UK. And at the end of the day, it just showed us that even in the middle of a pandemic where people are dying, we could get reasonable scientific studies that would answer pertinent questions. So I just want to talk about it's a trial I was very interested in right from the onset. And it said it's going to be studied in public health. Same thing as the case studies that led to us knowing that smoking causes cancer. This is going to be studied in the future as one of the best ways to approach clinical trials during the peak of the pandemic, because every other country failed, including the US. We ran multiple trials individually, but the recovery actually answered the question to each and every one of those trials that was going on. So that's just my input. I'm driving to the airport. I would mute myself again.
Thank you so much, Mana. I think you said it all. I mean, during COVID, there was a lot of fear factor going on. And if, in the UK, they were able to be emotionless, and I think probably they asked the question, what would science do, even in the face of what is happening? And they slowly delivered their protocol right to the end, and each time reporting whether this was working or not, and not being hyped by, everything that was going up in the news, which I think that was incredible. I think any other questions or comments from, let me see, I think if I can pick up one thing from the chat again. I think we've touched, yes, I think Martha was asking that, can an epidemiologist volunteer as a reviewer? So, Elvis, would you, within DAC-Africa, would you, is there place for volunteering in any capacity?
Obviously, there will be, right? So I would say that the program manager Clarence is right here on this call, and he can leave his the DAC-Africa contact on the chat. But I think if any question on volunteering goes to Clarence Banga, who is a program, Dr. Clarence Banga, who is a program manager, he can as well look at the entire operations of DAC-Africa and see some of those areas where volunteering could be very rewarding to the volunteer. And we can always create spaces for that. But I think there's always an opportunity for a volunteer to learn and to do some work.
All right. I think there was, I don't know if Professor Joseph Camio is still on the call. I know he joined at one point. I'm going through the list. I just wanted to pick on him. I know he delivers clinical trials, right on the ground in Cameroon. And it would have been lovely to hear his experience. I think he's good.
Yeah, I think we lost Professor Joseph Camio. I agree. It would have been very powerful to hear some of his reflection. Kati, if you don't, I wanted to call on one person. I think it looks like we have someone here from the Gates Foundation, or at least one of the people who were very instrumental in ensuring that DACA comes to Cameroon. It's Tia Normans. So I hope I pronounced the name right. But I really just wanted to invite you, Tia Norman, if you can unmute yourself and and really share a little bit about the inspiration to drive this into Africa, and really what your reflections are on how you foresee the program as it is today and into the future, and how what success would mean for this project in the 5 to 10 years to come. Tia?
Yeah, hello, everybody. I'm actually in a noisy place, so I'll just speak for a minute. I think Elvis has said it all, and they've had a great first year setting up the review service. Success really is to see more protocols going through this review and running on the continent. We know that more studies will be funded to run on the African continent, so establishing DAC-Africa now and demonstrating its value proposition so others can benefit from the review. We inside the foundation have reviewed about 150 protocols over the last couple of years. And so we're excited to see the opportunity for DAC-Africa to have the same success and impact focused on the African continent and led by African clinical experts. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Tia, and also thanks a lot for driving some of this and really contributing to making this happen. I think Africa remains a significant untapped potential when it comes to the enrollment in clinical trials and clinical research in general, and really very grateful that this has been a success so far, and really hope that this message goes out broadly to all stakeholders across the continent. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on that. Kathy, over to you.
Yes. Sorry, I was actually trying to call someone on the phone to hear his thoughts on the call. I mean, really, I think you've just really asked my last question. I think Tia said, more protocols coming through DAC-Africa. My question was probably very personal to Elvis. What would success mean for DAC-Africa? I think that is really tightly related. And DACA is looking at clinical trials informativeness. There is another issue which you touched slightly around stimulating, ideas for clinical trials even. And probably that would go through lots of, education and training. This platform, is already serving today for this particular reason. But apart from focusing on PIs, do you see DACA going maybe a step lower than the PIs to try and educate more on clinical trials?
Yeah, I hear you, Kate. We've had this conversation even at some point. At the very first 3 years of DACA, we want to focus on reviewing the clinical trial protocols. But I think when you are already in a space, right, you can be triggered by other things that are happening in that space to really develop other insights on some of the problems that you can solve. We would want to promote clinical trial informativeness in the continent. And even if it means giving university lectures on clinical trial informativeness, DAC-Africa can get into such programs or into such calls. I remember while I was in Paris, there was a professor from a university in Brussels who said, hey, Elvis, I want you to come give a lecture on clinical trial informativeness to my students, right? So that could just be some of the ways in which DAC-Africa can leverage their presence in the continent to seed the idea of clinical trial informativeness through other means, either by sharing our tools or maybe participating in some educational sessions. That's what we can do. But we might not be able to have the capacity now to go do some training on clinical trial as such. But we encourage principal investigators and funders that I have seen at the level of the Gates Foundation, and I think they can attest to this, where they even go below to do what they call advisory review, where somebody even just brings an idea. It's not a fully developed protocol, and flesh it out for a review. And the reviewers take it, spin it around and give the feedback to the PI, and the feedback becomes something that the PI can actually use to come up with a fully developed protocol. And when we are doing an advisory review, there are a lot of things that are absent. The PI has not said anything about statistical analysis plan. They have not said anything about this, but we still review it anyway. And we provide the feedback so that the PI can go and get some, the feedback and modify their trial and come up with a complete protocol. So we, in this first year, are not doing advisory review, but I hope that at some point we can do advisory review where you can just come up with an idea that is not fully developed and send for a review, and we can all review it and give feedback that can help you develop a complete and fully and a complete protocol. So I think that's one of the ways in which we can encourage clinical trial in the continent. But as far as training is concerned, hopefully DAC-Africa will be able to involve in training on informativeness and on clinical trial as the years go by.
Yeah, thank you so much, Elvis. I think Thea has just put a website where we can access DAC tools and other training information. I mean, everybody from the town hall, you can, access that website to see what's happening. I think, Martel, I think they've touched a bit on your question on the perspective on the negative outcome of the trial. I think both Elvis and Muno did touch a bit on, except you have any other thing to add to that, Elvis?
No, I think that we already talked about that.
Yeah. So I think we've gone through the list of some very important questions, and even Clarence has Clarence's email is in the chat for those who would love to get to Clarence around to know more information about DAC, especially if you are in Cameroon or maybe in other African countries. I don't know if there are other thoughts, other ideas from people in the room today around clinical trials. Has any of you been part of a clinical trial, and what was your experience clinical trial, especially clinical trials done?
Personally, I have not. I have assisted in reviewing manuscripts that have been submitted. I will try to not mention the names of the particular journals, but high impact journals for sure that have had translational impact during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think it's so important. We really haven't really had this culture in Africa, and I'm really excited. I think it's really powerful what Elvis and the team, and also thanks a lot, Tia, again for bringing this to Cameroon in particular. So very, very grateful. That culture, that educational culture really doesn't exist, but I hope that the introduction of this project into Cameroon will really help to galvanize and really that research culture and that thinking, that scientific thinking pattern will really help to really plant and spread the seeds across the continent, because I think we need a lot of this. And as Dr. Monokene mentioned, the successes of the recovery trial for me is that kind of vision that I have for the continent. And I hope that in collaboration, I know the Africa CDC is much more geared towards, public health interventions and things, but if we can have sort of a similar recovery trial like platform that exists on the continent and that can be leveraged instantaneously, I think that would be very helpful. But I also think that in terms of the educational piece, Katya, I also think that it's also it remains an untapped potential. So when you mentioned about going a step lower and exploring other avenues, whether it's involving lower, even students and things like that, and even whether it's PhD students or postdoctorates in Africa, and really engaging them into that, I think those really remain huge untapped potential. So that's my personal engagement in that. But I'd like to hear other thoughts as well.
No, very true, Brian. And I think African CDC also have a research unit that is involved in research. And while in Lusaka, I had the opportunity to meet with the director of Africa CDC and also the person who is in charge of the research unit. And they are all very happy to see what DAC-Africa is doing. And hopefully they will be able to put the word out there also about the work we do, but also that Africa CDC as they continue to speak about local manufacturing for vaccine and local manufacturing for other things, this comes with research, a high volume of research as well that will be going on in the continent. So they are very much really biased to promote the clinical trial ecosystem in Africa. And hopefully with this kind of collaboration, we hope that they can as well get into the aspect of education and trying to make sure that we get more of our research. As somebody mentioned during our meeting in Paris, like a lot of clinicians, no one really gets up and go take a specific training on clinical trials, right? You from a clinician in the hospital to the passion of investigating something, then you find yourself writing a protocol, and then you find yourself becoming a researcher, and then you start developing those skills. And so there's so much of unconscious competence that comes with just being a trialist, right? But we want some conscious competence where people can actually get some really training on what it takes to design a clinical trial protocol and what it takes to, conduct a clinical trial. And I think the link which they are shared also has a lot of some educational stuff which people can go there and get some courses on clinical trial, on how to run clinical trials. So that link is very important. So I think what we really want is where people are getting into some conscious competence of running clinical trial and not just doing it and then doing it well unconsciously, but really with some intent of the fact that you really want to be a clinical trialist or you want to be a clinical research professional that has the skills and the right frame of mind to do this work. And we are here as a review service to help those who are at the stage, or even I mean, there's no such thing as the best protocol, right? Even we at the level of the Gates Foundation, where they provide the funding to clinical research professionals and trials, we still review protocols and provide feedback to the PIs. If you can imagine a protocol that has been designed by an entire team of experts from across different continents, they come to the Gates Foundation, then the Gates Foundation sends it for a review, and they still comes back with feedback to the PI. And then you can imagine what it means by no such a thing like to think that you are too perfect to write a good protocol that should not be reviewed by anyone. I think even the best of PIs in the continent, we still think their protocols will benefit from a very important feedback from our review services. So that's why we encourage all funders and PIs to get their protocols to us for review.
Good. So I think what you've just said, I think just triggered a question in my mind. So does DAC welcome all protocols that are prepared by PIs or protocols that already have some form of funding and sponsorship?
As I mentioned, the first thought, we would want to go with protocols that have funding already secured. But we try to scale down again to increase the net by saying we would welcome a protocol that, even though has not had a funding, but is in the pipeline of securing a funding. So that's still coming down, which means like they are in a conversation with a funder, but there are still discussion going on. There is likelihood that that protocol can have funding. So we can review such a protocol. But as well as we can even still go down to review a protocol that is, we think it's a very important study. We think it's a very important protocol, and we think our review can help the PI to secure funding. So we can go to that path, but we just want to avoid reviewing a protocol where maybe a PI just jump up with a protocol, no idea of how it will be conducted or where the money will come from. And we take that and review. That could end up being a waste of resources if they end up not securing funding. So, and that's why we're just trying to avoid.
Yeah, thank you so much, Elvis. I think we have, I'm going to pick on Professor Joseph Camille, who is my teacher in public health. And I think he's, if I'm not mistaken, still the head of the public health department at the Faculty of Medicine and Biomedical Sciences, and one of the past vice deans for research. And I know, and most of us, I'm sure you know, that he runs clinical trials back in Cameroon, and we know all of the challenges. And I think I just want to pick on him to hear some of his thoughts and experience running clinical trials in a setting like Cameroon.
Thank you for passing me the floor, and thank you, Elvis, for this this I don't know how I call it, but this call you are organizing, or this workshop you are organizing to inform people about the resources that you have to help them conducting clinical trials in Africa in general, and in Cameroon in particular. Concerning my experience, I think the most difficult steps toward the clinical trial in Cameroon was the National Ethical Committee, because we really suffered with the National Ethical Committee. I don't know what was really the problem, but it started with these trials for HIV using, I don't remember that molecule, and the press came in and said the researchers were injecting HIV to people in Cameroon, and that really complicated the clinical trials in Cameroon. And there was some laws that was taken for clinical trials in Cameroon, and that really complicated the ethical clearance. So at time it was told that the clinical trials would be authorized by the presidency. So you can imagine that if all the trials have to pass through the presidency of Cameroon, you can imagine how difficult it can be. And up to date, I think clinical trials in Cameroon are not really easy. And competing with all the other researchers all over the world, with the ethical community so complicated in Cameroon, is a real concern. So I think that's something we should also try to work on, because you can have a very good protocol, but if you have to spend 4 years, as I did sometime, to have the clinical, to have the ethical clearance, it would be really difficult. So that's the most difficult thing I had with the clinical trials in Cameroon. And also, most of the trials we conducted was really field trials, not hospital-based trial. So most of our trials were field trial. And I think in the field it went well, no particular difficulty, except this step of the ethical committee. And one of the questions I wanted to ask Elvis is that if you are inviting everybody to bring the clinical trials, how do you measure the level of the solidity of the trial you receive? Because if you want to receive all the clinical trials, you could receive whatever. So I don't know if there is any step, at least to see if the trial is really strong enough to go through, because you can have anything.
Yeah. No, thank you very much, Prof. And good to have you on this call. Prof and I met in Paris, and we had a very great conversation. And I'm really impressed with the work he's doing in Cameroon with ISM, and especially in the field of onco. He's a really trusted authority when it comes to clinical research in Cameroon. So really a pleasure to speak with you here. And thanks for the amazing work you are doing in Cameroon. I hear you when you talk about the problem of ethical clearance, and the beauty about the future of clinical research in Cameroon is that the person who is now the national president of the ethics committee is Professor Wilfred Mbacham, who happened to be somebody who I got my training in bioethics through his hands, and we all ran the bioethics IRB in Biotechnology Center back in the days. And the problem even started when there was a reorganization of the law creating ethics committee, where they brought regional ethics committee, and I worked with that with Professor Kula back in the days when we had those meetings in Douala trying to draft those policy. And I remember having fought really hard to say that policy should not go through, because I knew it was going to cripple clinical research in Cameroon. And I hear you. Professor Mbacham now has taken the mantle, and he was at the DAC launch, and he actually had a presentation during the DAC launch in Yaoundé. And considering that he is a researcher himself and has conducted really huge research, we hope that he brings into that position an insight that will help shape the future of ethical clearance in Cameroon. It's our wish, and we hope that DAC-Africa is there to support the National Ethics Committee in any way that we can, to make sure that they can do their work. Part of our grants is to streamline or to do a scoping of the National Ethics Committee and identify how we can digitalize their review process. And there are opportunities that DAC-Africa has to digitalize the review process so that a PI in London can send their protocol for ethics review in Cameroon without printing 5 large copies to deposit in their office, as the case is now in paper-based review. So that's part of the work that DAC-Africa is doing, and we're hoping that we're going to collaborate with Professor Wilfred Bacham to make sure that that problem of getting ethical clearance in Cameroon is resolved once and for all. So that's one of the things. So yeah, and to your next question about how do we vet the protocols that we review, I mentioned the criteria of our inclusion criteria for the protocols that we review, and we cannot run into a conclusion to determine whether a trial is one that is credible or not without doing the review. In an alignment meeting, we can have some few ideas about the protocol, but I think the only basis for us to turn down a protocol is if it doesn't fit into the criteria that I set out to explain. For example, the trial might not even take place because they don't have funding, or the protocol is not well developed yet, like it's not even a fully developed protocol. We are not doing advisory review now, or maybe it's not taking place in Africa. So, but once a trial has met those inclusion criteria, we have the obligation to receive it, review it. And one of the best advice we can give the PI as well, I've never seen where we gave that kind of an advice before, but if we can find a subtle language to tell the PI that drop this down, don't do it because there's no way it can work, we'll certainly say that, but then we will say it in a way that can let the PI understand that, look, these are the considerations you need to take if you think that this trial is going to work. And these considerations are important if you think this trial is going to be informative. But we can as well rate the trial, the chances of the trial ending uninformatively, and tell you in our comments that there are high chances that if you run this trial, it's going to end uninformative. And it's up to the PI to decide what to do with our comments. Because first and foremost, unlike at the Gates Foundation, and I'll say this, unlike at the Gates Foundation, where maybe a PI can want to implement all the feedback from the review because the funder is a Gates Foundation, DAC-Africa is not funding any PI. So we don't have any control over what they do with our feedback. They can take our feedback and decide not to implement it, right? We can force them to implement our feedback, right? But all we want to do is let them see the beauty of what we are offering, so they can see that if we implement the feedback that DAC-Africa has given us, then there are high chances that our protocol is going to end up informatively. And I think if we review 10 protocols and we do our our analysis and realize that majority of our comments, 80% of our comments to the PIs were implemented, that would be a big success for DAC-Africa, because we can say without any cohesion, without any fear of maybe not having funding, the PIs were able to take this feedback and implement them. That would be a big story for DAC-Africa. So our hope is that PIs come to us with the mindset that we want our trial to be informative. That's why we want DAC-Africa to review it.
Okay, thank you. And what can I say again? The other thing is that the protocol is, what can I say? It's so important for clinical trials, but also the platforms are also important to really conduct clinical trials. And in Africa here, we've been conducting phase 2, rarely, mostly phase 3, phase 4. And when I go around countries in Africa, I don't see early stages of clinical trials. And if we are thinking at developing our internal really drugs, we need to have good platforms for clinical trial, and particularly for early phases. And I don't know, I don't really know who is there to really support this type of initiatives, because we can use molecules that are from pharmaceutical industry. But I heard somebody talking about this product, this drug that were developed in Cameroon for COVID. Nobody knows if these were really efficient. But if we really want to understand the efficacy of these drugs, there is a way of developing traditional drugs. But if one day we really want to contribute to the development of drugs, we need to have early phases centers. We need to have good teams. And I don't know how we organize ourselves to have such teams, to have such platforms in Africa. I know it's out of the scope of what you are doing for this workshop, but I think we should also think at that.
You know, that's very important, Prof. I agree with you. And when I look at the beauty of your center, how much money you have put to construct that wonderful edifice, and then I'm asking myself, why can you not even do a phase 2 trial at your center? I think you need assistance, you need the right equipment, you need the right team. And that's why I'm so proud of the work you are doing, because when I look at the investment you have put to construct that center, then it means you are really somebody who has that vision to do this kind of a work. And I think with the right collaboration and the right opportunities, your center can just be one of those centers that can really start doing some of those really early phase clinical trial. And it's really a question we should all ask ourselves. And this is a platform. If you find any collaboration of stakeholders that want to partner for research, I think Professor Joseph is one of those people. You can reference him to your partners, because I know the work he's doing in Cameroon is great. So just that's why we are here.
Close the door.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Prof, for rejoining and for coming again. I know with the poor network at times in Cameroon. Professor Camille was the winner of I think Christophe Mero Prize back in 2022. And so we are obviously proud. I've been to your center personally, and I know what Elvis is talking about. It's something that once you go inside as a young man, you know, it stimulates your brain to think big. So thank you for your work, Prof.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So I think we are slowly winding down towards the end of this very interesting session. Except someone else. I don't know if Mona, are you able to speak, or you are on the queue?
Yes, I'm on the queue heading into so you can continue. I just want to thank everyone for being here and thank Elvis for the wonderful job. I've been looking forward to this session, really for you to inform us about what DAC is doing. And I think with this, I'm a big fan and a big advocate, so you can count on me on sharing this and making sure that the researchers know exactly what is happening. So, Kate and Brian, thank you for moderating the session. And Elvis, we'll miss your summary. I hope you're going to give one.
I don't think Elvis will be doing a summary today. It will not be fair on him. I would pass that over to Brian for a good summary, maybe. Brian has a very strong mental capacity. He's not been taking notes, but I'm sure he would do a good job with the summary.
Oh no, I wasn't prepared to give a summary. I just really want to appreciate Dr. Kamno. Many of us who left from Cameroon, the foundation that we have in public health was because of Professor Kamno. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to really express my deepest gratitude to him as a faculty member as well of the Faculty of Medicine and Biomedical Sciences in Yaoundé, and extending this training and really providing us with a foundation that has enabled us to do many of the things that we are doing today. So I'm really deeply grateful. I think it will be a great inspiration to other Cameroonians as well, and other younger generations as well, to have you here, Prof, to I don't know, maybe to talk to us about maybe public health or clinical research in general in Cameroon or in Africa. Maybe will help to give some inspiration to us all and really help to guide us. So just wanted to say thank you very much. I'm deeply grateful for the impact that you've had directly and indirectly my own personal career. I'm deeply, deeply grateful for that. And I really, we continue to admire you as we see all the progress that you continue to make in your center and internationally. So, Prof, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian, for a very wonderful summary. Great. Elvis, so before we close this session, I think this is going to be one of the first sessions we'll be closing at exactly 2-hour mark. But any last words, Elvis? That shows that when the moderator is presenting, I think the moderator himself is time conscious.
No, I just want to thank you and Dr. Kate and Dr. Brian for your moderation, and to thank everyone who tuned in to listen to this presentation. It's really been a delight to present to you what DAC-Africa can do. Like I mentioned, my hope is that you all leave this presentation today as ambassadors of DAC-Africa, to tell the story to all your friends and colleagues who are involved in research, that DAC-Africa is a resource that is there to help them. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Elvis, for your wonderful presentation. I think it's been really digestible tonight, really slow but really clear, talk right from the start to this point. Not complicated stuff, as we usually say. Keep it simple and and clear. And so thank you everyone for joining on this very last session of the town hall for the year 2023, and see you next year come 2024 for other exciting sessions for the Cameroon Town Hall.
Yeah.
God bless you. Merry Christmas.
Great. Thank you. And our next session will be in January.